Transformation Tuesdays. I am your host, Christy Effelman. I'm the CEO and founder of Edge Leadership, and we build peer mentoring circles inside companies and across industries. And today we are being joined by Gina Winstead. So say hello to Gina.
Hi, friends. Good to see you today.
We're so excited to have you, my friend. And before I let Gina introduce herself, some quick comments around framing. If you have joined us before, you may know that we started this live series last year when I published my first book, The Peer Revolution. So the live started by featuring some of the 68 storytellers in the book, and then we caught fire and momentum. And we wanted to continue it. And as we were headed into 2023, which is our 10th anniversary here at Edge Leadership. So in the last 10 years, more than 10,000 leaders globally have gone through our group coaching experiences. I was then faced with, how do I transform Transformation Tuesdays for 2023? And all of our guests joining us this year are cohort members from our group coaching experiences who have personally transformed who I am as a leader, as a woman, as a mother, and partner and friend. And Gina, babe, you are one of those people for me, and I am so honored to have you here. Everyone, please drop a note in the comments. Say hello to Gina as she introduces herself to us.
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me. As Christy said, my name is Gina Winstead. I like to use my middle name sometimes, so Gina Estelle Winstead. And I have an interesting life, I guess, sort of. Some people might want to hear about it. But I grew up in the Pittsburgh area. I grew up in McKeesport, Pennsylvania, down on the Mon, we like to say, and really just had a great childhood and tried to stay involved in a lot of things, whether it was environmental or getting involved in the arts, but I never imagined that I would be where I am today as the Vice President for Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accessibility at the Carnegie Museums of Pittsburgh. Thank you for the snaps. I will take the
I will give you snaps. That's just the beginning of the snaps you're getting tonight. People are going to be snapping all over the place. I'm confident of that.
So that's 4 snaps because that's 4 museums at least. And yeah, so a lot of my career has been spent really getting involved with community engagement, trying to make sure that there are opportunities for people because of growing up in McKeesport and growing up as a Black biracial woman, non-binary person, and also someone who is queer with my sexual orientation. It really allows me to see the gaps that are there for people and the opportunities that I might not have had in the time frame that I probably should have had them. So that's kind of what my experience has been. I feel that sometimes I'm a little late in blooming or late in coming into my professional career, but other times I'm like, how am I a VP at, we'll just say it, at 40? So I just turned 40 this year too, which is really exciting. And I always say to wish to be young is to wish to be less wise, or to wish to be younger is to wish to be less wise, because there's wisdom that I have gained. And so I've had a lot of different experiences, whether it was growing up in McKeesport, then going to University of Pittsburgh, and then figuring out that I really needed to do some work that was more impactful, or actually just work that took me out of the port in Pittsburgh. And so I did that. I moved to North Dakota. I moved across the country with a partner at the time, and I worked in the energy industry, and I lived this interesting Western lifestyle where the town had 100-to-1 male to female ratio. There were absolutely no other people of color there. And I hated my job. I made really great money. I moved to North Dakota to go have a new experience and to make money. I did that. But at the end of the day, it was really kind of eating away at me to do the work in the energy sector. And I wanted to come home. I have a twin sister in Pittsburgh. I have a mom and a brother, and I have lots of family here. So I wanted to come home, and I wanted to start doing some impactful work. So that's what I did. I came home. I also got divorced. So that was another.
I forgot about that was in there too.
There's a divorce in there whenever I moved home. And I really got engaged in community engagement work and figured out a way that I could work into technology. And so I got my entry level position working as a sales development representative, SDR, we all know it in the tech world, for a cybersecurity company. And I really loved it, but I was undervalued when I came into the organization, and I knew that I needed to figure out a way to stand out. So I started to lead the charity committee at this cybersecurity company, and then I was finding like I need to do more. So I wrote a DM to someone on LinkedIn who was the boss of the Pittsburgh Technology Council. And I said, hey, I see you have some positions open. I would love a chance to talk to you about it. Would you be interested in having a conversation with me? I'd love to work for you. And it worked. And so that kind of led into another thing. And that's sort of where I am today. In this position is opening my mouth, using my skills on social media and sleuthing. Internet sleuthing is a skill of mine. And I use it for good. I mean, it's not just there for like stalking old exes or whatever.
I mean, it's convenient for that too, but we can use it for good.
For lots of good. So, there's lots of instances where you can write people and they would love to talk to you. And I found out that people want to talk to you way more than you think they want to talk to you. So that's kind of where my story led me into tech. That job helped me to see an opportunity to create equity for more women and more people of color working in technology. And I created a role of director of DEI for the Tech Council.
Get snaps for that one too, girl.
That was a big one too. But that came from the encouragement and the experience of going through Edge Women's Leadership. Absolutely. So that's definitely to your credit, Christy, is having programs and supports in place that helped me to nourish who I was and to get into a place to create more opportunities for other people to have access into lucrative job fields and just industries that need our presence so that they can be more ethical and they can be more inclusive when they put out products. So that was that.
All of that. And I love when you were saying about, like thank you for sharing your story with us from start through till now, because there are so many beautiful nuances and twists and turns that your story has had that I've had the privilege of witnessing or hearing about from you as a friend and a colleague. But to hear you tell the story, what came up for me was life is not a straight line. And, some of those were choices you intentionally made, and some of those were, opportunities that life put in front of you. And each time you you went with it, but then you steadied your course and decided, was this serving me? Was it not? All right, if it's not, what's next? So, one of the things that just came up for me right then was the power of having intention while also being flexible, which is a quality I see in spades in you.
Absolutely. I would say like the flexibility is the one thing that I think has allowed me to stay the course and stay resilient, whether it was switching industries, switching partners, switching places where I'm living. I mean, going from Pittsburgh to North Dakota, it may not seem like a big deal, but North Dakota's winters are like -10 degrees. And like I said, there was absolutely no diversity. There were no women working in my industry. There were no LGBTQ people there either. So I really just leaned into opportunity and took the pain with it, but then used it to help project me into my future when I came back to Pittsburgh. So even if things got shaky, I figured out a way to use that, whether it was a hardship, whether it was a bad relationship, how can I use that for good in the future and also to benefit other people in the future?
Yeah, because that's aligned with your personal purpose. It's tied to others. It's not just for you.
No, yeah, I would say that definitely my purpose in life is to create opportunities for other people, to make sure that we all have a space at the table, make sure that we all have representation to see other people like us as well. Because I think I didn't see that in the beginning. When I entered into technology, I was one of the only Black employees at the organization, at the company. And I knew that there needed to be more of us. I knew that we just didn't see the openings. We didn't have connections and a buddy to refer us in. And so that system needed to be shifted. And so I'm really working on shifting systems and trying to get organizations to be flexible in the same way that I am flexible.
I love that. I love that. So take us back to you pre-Edge, before one of your many transformations, but let's just call it the most recent transformation. What was your personal and professional life, and then what shifted and how?
So pre-Edge, I mean, I got into Edge pretty instantly, almost instantly at the Pittsburgh Tech Council. But before that, I had watched other people get into this Edge program, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not worthy to be a part of that. Or how do I even raise my hand to say I'm interested in becoming a leader one day whenever I'm just a coordinator, or someone who didn't manage people. And so I had a lot of insecurity, I think, in me before my transformation. Like I said, I recently turned 40. I had a huge 40th birthday party with my twin sister. Both of my parents spoke at it. And one of the things that they always remind me of and introduced the rest of my friends and colleagues to was the fact that I was very shy growing up. So I wouldn't public speak. I mean, that was out of the question. I would barely speak in a group of friends at times. So just being very shy was a part of what I thought was my personality. And it really wasn't. It was just a roadblock to understanding how I needed to communicate. But I think it was somebody who didn't know what was the future, what my capabilities were. It was also uncertainty around my value of who I am as a person, not my values, but that I have value. So
Yes.
that's like personal and professionally, but personally, I think I undervalued myself, whether it was being in a toxic relationship before. I put up with things I didn't have to. And once you go through a transformation where you realize that things aren't acceptable, you start to shift every aspect of your life, not just personally, but it pours into your professional life. So once I let go of a really toxic relationship, I was able to move into different areas professionally too. And I was able to do that emotionally and mentally, but also like physically. Like I just got into a better work office, got into different clothing, like shifted the way that I present myself, saw myself too in different light, as well as like being someone who has always identified as a woman to being someone who identifies as non-binary and someone with feminine characteristics, and really understanding that some of the characteristics that were pointed out to me as being, masculine were really just my leadership skills and my leadership talents. And so trying to come to realization of what that means for me has been a part of my transformation, and that I'm not pigeonholed into one identity, and I never really have been. But how do I show up now so other people, other non-binary people, other women, other LGBTQ queer folks can see that they can be authentically themselves in spaces, even if it feels uncomfortable and means you're challenging systems.
Yes, especially if it means that you're challenging systems. What comes up for me as you were talking, and when you started with the shyness, I started thinking about Brene Brown talking about the concept of putting on armor, and how we armor up to have difficult conversations. We armor up to go into the arena, whatever the arena may be for us, a difficult work conversation, a conversation with our partner, whatever that may look like. And as you were talking about, when you make a shift in one part of your life, it cannot help but shift the other parts of our lives. We get out of a toxic relationship and all of a sudden there's new opportunities at work. We leave a company or a boss who has been, manipulating us, and we all of a sudden are ready to set boundaries at home. And I think it has a lot to do with when we start to take off the armor, we can feel the sense of freedom. And it's like, oh, I can turn my head all the way around because I don't have a helmet on anymore that's just forcing me to look ahead. And oh, I can lift my arms up, because I don't have all this weight on me.
Yeah, I think a lot of us restrict ourselves by wearing that armor. And sometimes we think that we need it when it's just a mental need for the armor. And it's not, I'm not in a place where I have to physically be afraid anymore. My last relationship had me physically afraid of things constantly. So like that armor comment definitely like strikes a chord with me. Is me and my therapist, I definitely believe in having therapy, but me and my therapist would talk about
Five
like,
steps to that right now.
but I think therapists talk about like wearing armor a lot, especially if you're in some type of a therapy for like domestic violence or coming out of traumatic instances. And we used to talk about like, what does your armor look like? Is it like, is it colorful? Is it what kind of metal is it made out of? And once you paint that armor, you know what it looks like when you have to take it off too. And you also know how heavy it is. And the deeper you get into bad situations, whether it's professionally or personally, the more armor you wear and the heavier and more difficult and longer it takes to take off. So I think giving myself grace with taking off my armor has been a big like life change for me. Is I thought it would be instant, but it has definitely taken me years to like take that Under Armour off, and I still have like layers on at different times where I'm like, all right, you know what, this person's being a little aggressive, whether it's a boss or a friend or anything, I'm going to put that back on, and that's going to serve me as a shield for here. But the next conversation I can probably take down my shield. And so, especially when you're doing work like I am in inclusion and diversity and equity and accessibility, people want to challenge you frequently on your belief systems or the validity of doing work that helps to uplift others who have historically been under invested in. And so it does require me to pick up my armor, and now I know where it's at and I know how to put it on.
That's right. And you can do it when it serves you. And I would also, the other thing that comes up for me is, it's one thing when we don't realize that we have our armor on and we are going through life with this armor on and it is limiting us in ways. And, Gina and I just talked a little bit about that. And then it's another thing, as Gina just shared, about that I can selectively choose to use parts of my armor, whether it's my shield or it's my helmet or it's my breastplate. Perhaps you want to protect your heart. And I think that for a lot of us, we have to be thoughtful we don't feel safe in certain environments with certain people and certain organizations. And so I want to make that distinction that choosing to put your armor on because you're in a situation or a place that doesn't feel safe is very different than walking through your life fully armored up as if you are a gladiator headed into battle and you're having a conversation with a dear friend.
Absolutely. And I think you touched on an important part of speaking about psychological safety. I do diversity and inclusion for a organization that has almost 900 employees. I understand that people come here every day with things that they're bringing with them from home or from, any of their life experiences. Maybe it's something 20 years ago, who knows? But also we as managers and leaders need to demonstrate trauma-informed management skills. And I don't hear it talked about nearly enough, but you are absolutely a leader who kind of leans into, we all come to the table, we all come to work with instances. And very frequently for people who are diverse and marginalized, there's trauma there, whether it's having closer proximity to neighborhood violence, having less access to education, having more instances of violent police engagements or just violence in general, or the judicial system. That's definitely there more for people who are Black and brown and LGBTQ or any of these categories that really make you at risk for society's harm, I guess. And so just really thinking about how can we as leaders move forward in a way that takes into consideration this person might be coming with not just armor, but some baggage that needs to be, we need to create some psychological safety for once they're here.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I often, when I'm challenging leaders to be more brave, like that's, it's looking at these spaces as, because I feel like, and I'd love your thoughts on it. I feel like a lot of organizations throw around this concept of safety. It's a safe space. It's a safe space. And I choose to talk about it as a brave space. And I'm just curious, do you have an opinion one way or the other on that language?
I mean, I think it's both. I think there's bravery on both sides by leading in that direction. So I think it takes a brave leader to open up themselves to hear what their employees are dealing with personally. And it also takes a brave employee to kind of share as well. And so in order to have bravery, you sometimes first have to have safety. For me personally, as like a complex trauma survivor, I know that I need safety before I need bravery. And we'll talk about, like flight, fight, or fawn. Mine is, where's my safety first? And then when can I be brave? But also, yes, I mean, I think the bravery is absolutely important. And sometimes it requires someone being brave on my behalf in order to get me to where I need to be. And sometimes it involves Christy being brave on my behalf to get me to where I need to be. So that brave leadership is a vital key to create vice versa. I think they like feed into each other. They're like probably circular, safety and bravery. And also definitely safety comes before bravery, always. Assess the situation. We are in an interesting time doing diversity and inclusion work where your physical safety may be at risk. And that's what I want to also highlight. We can talk about psychological safety, but we're in a space for physical safety, and having plans for physical safety in business offices is important. And so thinking about those things too, as we roll through Pride Month, how are we providing physical safety for our employees if something should happen, whether online or in person. So,
yeah, equally important. Equally important. Thank you for that, my friend. And as you reflect back, because you had mentioned your Edge cohort, and while I appreciate the shout out, I am not taking credit for any of your achievements, and neither is Edge. You can thank your Edge sisters if you want to, but I would love to hear from you as you reflect back on that experience with them, beside them. What were your 3 big takeaways?
So I would say, I think the very first engagement with Edge was monumental for me. So when you start the Edge program, if you're lucky enough to go through pre-pandemic, which I was, we had this big launch at Nemacolin Resort, which is a beautiful resort in Western Pennsylvania for folks that don't know. And you're just kind of thrown into having to have conversations about your feelings and the workplace right away. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so uncomfortable. I don't know. I knew one person really well, but I didn't know the majority of the people. And I kind of had never invested in myself. So just that initial, let's invest in Gina, let's invest in who you are as a person, not just professionally, but like who you are as a person, and get to know who you were as a child and teenager and college, and where you are now, was a big new thing for me. I hadn't invested in myself. So that was the first takeaway, was that you have to invest in yourself if you want other people to invest in you. And sometimes you have to raise your hand and say, I need some investment. People have to know where your bank is at to make a deposit. So I always say, like, let people know what you're looking for. And so, yeah, that was a big part of it. But I also think we had a unique experience with my Edge cohort. We had someone pass away in our cohort who was battling cancer for a long time. And I think going through something where you have to realize that you're all doing this to better your lives, but you're also impacting other people, and life is still so fleeting. So we need to do this in a way with intention and make sure that we have connections that withstand this one engagement, or this 9-month engagement. So it was really hard. We lost Lynn. She passed away, and it was transitional for me. And it was the same year that I had also lost my stepdad. I lost an uncle, and I lost a friend to the drug epidemic. And so it was a year of loss for me, and having other people around me who were also suffering from a shared loss and their own losses in different instances was transformational, because it's a little bit of an awakening, but it's also a humanizing experience to realize we are here as professionals, but every day we're coming here with our sorrows, and those sorrows can lead into our passions to do the work and to do work that we love. So it helped us to do, I think, the work that we love with more intentionality and in a slower process. And so that was definitely this second thing. And then I hate to just move on from that because it's hard. It's hard thinking of that year. It was 2019, right before the pandemic, and there was just so much loss. And then it kind of led into the next year of 2020 when everyone was experiencing loss together. Loss of
collective grief, right?
Collective grief, loss of trust in the systems, loss of security of our health, physical loss, a lot of us losing great aunts, uncles, grandparents, parents. So I think it was something that prepared us all as a group to go into the COVID pandemic, which I don't think I expected to say that, but I definitely feel that kind of prepared us for that type of experience. But also, how can you use that loss to connect? And we always tried to connect, whether it was Zoom or small groups. And so that was something that was instilled in us from that point forward. And we continue to use that going into Edge. And I still do that, try to connect virtually or, in small groups with people occasionally.
And then in chances like where we get to be together in person, then we can't stop hugging. I got to see Gina last week, everyone, at the Pittsburgh Diversity Conference, and I just couldn't stop hugging her. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're here in real life. Just one more.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a very special cohort. And I mean, I take all of that with me constantly. I was telling you, Christy, I still use my Edge card, my coaching card. It comes in handy a lot with managing folks and with having to deal with difficult conversations in the workplace. So I really appreciate that experience. It was life-changing, and I recommend it to everyone. Once I came out, I started to help make sure more women of color could get into the cohort. I supplied names, I made suggestions, I scoured my LinkedIn looking for who's a good Black woman in tech or an LGBTQ woman working in tech that I can help get access to get empowered to do the work with the community. And so that was definitely part of the takeaways. My job was now to make this accessible for everybody too.
Yes. And with that, I can't even believe, but it is time to close out. So final thoughts, Gina, if you could give one piece of advice to someone who is listening right now as I'm going to call you a serial transformation artist, as someone who has transformed her life in so many ways, as someone who has transformed how they work and how they live, what's the one piece of advice you would give to that person right now?
I would talk to them about how they talk to themselves. So I used to talk to myself very negatively. I used to accept my own criticism from people outside and inside of my organization, but like the outside voices, I used to listen to them with much more weight than I do now. I was just listening to my daily Jay Shetty. I listen to him every morning on the Calm app. This isn't a plug. It's just literally how I live my life. How I have to wake up every morning. So Jay Shetty was just talking about ignoring the external noise and talking about how you are on the court and there are people in the stands. Or maybe you are on the stage and there are people in the audience. And very frequently in the past, I listened to those people in the stands. I listened to those people that were in the audience and forgot that I was centered and I was on the stage. I had something to offer. So I think my advice is just remember that you're on the court. They're in the stands. You're the one playing. You're the one that knows your industry best, your job best. So listen to that. And then you can also just kind of pick out who's on the court with you. You always have your own teammates that are usually there. You have your coordinators of the events who can give you the feedback you need, but you don't have to listen to all of that static noise. And working in diversity and inclusion, I will tell you there's a lot of static noise. So I have to practice what I preach very often. And that was something that resonated with me this week. And I wanted to pass it on to everybody. But make sure you hold your position on the court and you let those haters stay in the stands where they're at.
I love it. I have nothing to say to that other than thank you for joining us, because there's nothing. I want to leave you with that, my friends. Thank you for joining us. Gina, thank you for sharing your head, your heart, and your belly with our little corner of the internet tonight. Grateful to know you, girl.
Thanks for listening.
See you soon.